I've got the voice. That's what they tell me. I am one of the founding members here. Some of you, maybe a lot of you, have seen me on television. That's kind of a more recent thing. That started about 5 years ago. But in 1985, I got the nod to come up here, and I became the director of the Clark County Museum. And some of you may remember that. I was here from 1985 to 1993. I used to write for the Telegram Tribune, which is now the Tribune. I have to keep track of all these changes. But I moved out of this area in 1993, went over to Las Vegas to create an aviation museum. One of the things I did, though, and I'm going to tell a story on myself about the Price House and the Friends of the Price House. I was interested in the Price House. I was interested in the story of John Michael Price. I remember when the Tri-Gable Adobe site just behind here burned. I came out here, it was still smoking when I saw it. In fact, my wife and I came over here to see it. I wrote about John Michael Price. I wrote about this house. I wrote about that site. I wrote about the Maharans. You know, all of this was something that I was interested in because you've got an interesting site here. I mean, this is a site that goes back to the earliest overland expedition in California. In 1769, when Portola was bringing his expedition up through California, one of the stops he made was right here on this site where the Chumash village was. And this is an early site. It's an important site. And then you had John Michael Price, little short guy, had kind of an interesting history, got deported from California for being an illegal alien, and came back again. This is during the Mexican period because he was an illegal alien. He jumped ship from an English ship and ended up building his adobe here, using the Chumash here to make the bricks for him, paid 1 peso a brick for those bricks, and then later finally built this for his wife on their anniversary. I guess she was finally tired of living in the adobe, so he had to build her something nicer here. And you still have it. But when the Friends of the Price House, and this was back in '92, when you were getting started, I was the county museum director, and I was asked to do a speech. And I said, okay, I can do that. And they said, well, you know, we'd like you to speak on John Michael Price, on his history. Okay, fine. And we had the talk at a dinner, or it was a luncheon, I guess, at the auditorium at the old school. Remember the Pismo Beach School, when that got condemned and you kicked the kids out of there, so you put emergency services in there? You know, it's a good city way of handling things. You're not the only ones, trust me. I was just down in Guadalupe yesterday. They've done the same thing. But it was one of those things, you know, it had a nice big auditorium, and it was like this, and there were just rows of tables, and I stood up on the stage, and I had a single microphone, and I was so nervous that I stood there. I had written out my speech, and I was so nervous. I wish I had a pad of paper here. You could not hear me over the shaking of the paper in my hand. It was, you know, my wife stood there and looked at me, and she said, by the time I realized that I couldn't read the paper, it was shaking too fast. You know, that I just dropped the papers down and gave my speech. She said, oh, that was so much nicer. You know, because she was sitting and my wife's out here. And by the way, for all of you from Pismo Beach, my wife used to run your data processing department here. From 1986 to 1993, you actually had a single data processing department that was Pismo Beach, Arroyo Grande, Grover Beach, and Oceano. And yes, it was Grover City, I know this. But you had one single data processing department, and she was the director of it. So it was one of those things. You guys did get me started by showing me just how bad a speaker I could be. And I want to thank you for that. Because I've learned since then. You know, one of the things I've learned is if you give me a microphone and a camera, I have absolutely no shame, and I can talk about anything. You need somebody to go on camera, I can do that for you now. But more importantly, I can also come back and help support something like this. When you look at any community, if you don't have some way of tying back into your history, how can you possibly be proud of your community? If you have no sense of why your community exists, why, for whatever reason, would you be there? It's got to be something more than an ocean view. because there's a lot of ocean views. How are you different than anywhere else? And it takes sites like these in order to show that, in order to make it possible for your kids to know, for your visitors to know, and for yourselves to know. You all, I'm talking, to the converted here. You're here, you're supporting the Friends of the Price House, but this is for the greater community as well, because nowadays, when you look at this site, it seems isolated. You don't think of this as the center of town. This was the town. This was all there was here. When this area got started, when this area got settled, there was no Pismo Beach. There was no Hotel El Pismo. There was nothing out there. This was what was here. And people would come through here. Portola came through here and stopped. John Michael Price, when he got his rancho here, he was right here. This was the center of everything. And even though the way the town has developed, this has kind of gotten a little backwatered, it isn't. This is your center. This is your beginning. And this is important. And it's important to have a place for any community like that. And it's really nice that you have a volunteer group that has continued to work on this and continued to make it something that improve it each time. Something like this, you don't do it overnight. I've run museums for 37 years all over the United States. There's no museum I've ever been at that was created overnight. Even the ones that I've created, I didn't do overnight. So something like this takes time. But if you had seen this place the way I saw it in 1987 and 1988, I think it was, Susan, do you remember 87, 88? When did the Adobe burn? Was that, it was right in there. 87, okay. I should have checked my notes before I got up here, I guess. It's one of those problems, you spend 20 years talking about Las Vegas history, you forget a little Pismo Beach. But, no, but in 87, if you had seen this place, what Lucy was talking about, this house looking like, if you had seen it then, you would have said, I don't know. And if you'd seen the smoking ruins behind us, it was like, oh, we've lost it. But you hadn't. And people saw that you hadn't. And they started working on it. The city's involvement in it, and the Five Cities men's group, all of these, it takes all of that to restore and to keep a place like this. So I hope that you're going to continue to do this and to just work on it as you can. Don't worry if it takes 20 years or 40 years. It doesn't matter. The whole point is that you've saved it. It's here. It's not going anywhere. That's the most important part. One of the things at my current museum, the Clark County Museum, is I have a 30-acre site. I have 20 historic buildings on that site, all of which have been moved in. Some of those buildings have taken us 20 years to get restored. We don't care. That's all right. It will get restored. We will get it open, just as you have. And one of the things is, if you're going to work in museum work, don't worry about the long term. That's what you're working with. Don't think it's got to be done overnight. Take it as you can, do what you can, because each step that you're taking is a step forward. So you've been able to do that, and you're continuing to. So I hope that you will continue to do that. Now, I will say, some of you already know this, if you have questions about Pawn Stars, if you want to know about the Harrisons, anything like that, I'm happy to talk about them. Some of you have probably found that. My wife is not even looking at me right now. She will tell you that I'm happy to talk about that. I will do that when I'm out there, but at this point, I just want you to know that it is wonderful to be back over here. It's wonderful to see what has been accomplished here over the years since I've been gone. And it is one of those things where I really didn't think I would be able to do this. When I was here and running the county museum and living down in Grover Beach, I didn't think that there was going to be a time when you could have picnics here and you could have events here and you would have a restored house here and you would have the Maharan house. I mean, that was right on the highway. I mean, that thing, I remember I watched that for years thinking, oh, they're going to expand that road. and that house is going to go away. I mean, that's your history. And you didn't do that. You saved it. You brought it in here. You stabilized it. You'll restore it. And it will be open. And you will be able to talk about your history. And you've got a great history here. So I hope you continue to do that. I'm really happy to be back over here. If you have any questions, I'll answer them out there. But thank you for inviting me back. It's awfully nice to be able to do a speech where my papers aren't rattling too much. You know, you got some paper? That was about what you were hearing the last time. But I've gotten a little better at it over the years. So thank you very much. Have fun today.